Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on News X World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The United States and India have agreed on a trade deal after a phone call between President Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The US will lower tariffs on Indian imports to 18%, while India agrees to reduce tariffs and non-tariff barriers on US goods to zero and stop buying Russian oil. President Donald Trump has warned that bad things could follow if Iran fails to reach a deal with the US, as pressure mounts after Tehran's January protest crackdown. Former US President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton have agreed to testify in a congressional investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, days before a planned vote on holding them in contempt. The couple deny wrongdoing and say they've already shared all they know. A U.S. federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from ending temporary protected status for more than 350,000 Haitians, halting potential deportations amid Haiti's escalating gang violence. Meanwhile, U.S. District Judge Anna Raines said claims that DHS Secretary Kristi Noem acted with hostility towards non-white immigrants. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, has announced that all DHS field officers in Minneapolis will be issued body-worn cameras, a move backed by President Donald Trump as a step towards transparency, as the Justice Department also now conducts a civil rights investigation into Prete's death. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said engagement with China makes us stronger following his visit, but stressed the UK is clear-eyed about security threats from Beijing and that protecting national security is non-negotiable. The European Union, headed by Anna Prates, head of the Middle East and North Africa Bilateral Instruments Unit for Syria and the Middle East, held talks with the Syrian director of the International Cooperation Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates, Kutaiba Kadish, as they explored ways to expand cooperation. OpenAI has explored alternatives to NVIDIA's AI chips, citing speed limits on interference tasks like coding. While NVIDIA remains dominant in training chips, the move could test its AI leadership as talks between the two companies continue. Now for this hour, we start with Iran and US. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has called for fair and equitable negotiations with the United States. He has instructed his foreign minister to pursue talks with Washington, signaling a change in Tehran's stance amid ongoing tensions. The announcement follows growing pressure from both regional allies and global leaders after Iran's deadly crackdown on protests. This latest move also marks a clear sign that Pezeshkian has received support from Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei to engage in talks with the US. However, the Iranian president has also clarified that any negotiations must take place in an atmosphere free of threats and unreasonable demands. While the US has yet to formally respond to this offer, President Donald Trump has previously warned of consequences if a deal was not reached regarding Iran's nuclear program. Additionally, a senior UAE's official, Anwar Gargash, has spoken at the World Government Summit in Dubai, urging Iran to rebuild its relationship with the US. Let's listen into his statement.
I think from everything that I know, Iran today needs to reach a deal. I think Iran, on the one hand, has suffered geopolitically, and at the same time, its economy needs to rebuild itself, and to rebuild that, they need to rebuild their relationship with the United States. I think through reaching a deal, a political deal, a wider geostrategic deal that will actually be beneficial to the area, the Iranians are also helping themselves in ultimately what they need, which is rebuild their economy.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Peter Baum. He's the editor at Weekly Blitz, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Baum, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, as tensions arise between them, what can we expect from both of them? As you know, both of them are hard-headed, of course. It seems like they have some disagreements, like the nuclear deal, that nuclear ambition that Iran wants to pursue and US wants to halt.
Yes, we assume that the talks are going to proceed on Friday. That's the day that we understand will be the start of the negotiations. But of course, Iran has very little leverage in the current world order. As we know, their economy is in absolutely dire straits. Politically, they are virtually isolated. They're getting verbal support from China and Russia, but that's about it. Their proxies have been decimated, and there's not a lot they can do given the military build-up that's still going on of the US armada, as Trump calls it, and the Air Force in the planes, which are in Azerbaijan, Qatar, etc. So it's very difficult to see what the Iranians can offer Trump, who, from his posts on social media, is being very strong about what he wants on the deal, and that's basically for the Iranians to completely give up not only their nuclear capability, but also the ballistic missiles that they hold. So all the cards, as we say, are in the hands of the Trump administration, and the Iranians, other than offering the rhetoric about what will happen if there is not a peaceful outcome, etc., and they won't be forced into a corner unless the talks are, what was the term they used, fair and in an atmosphere of peace.
Yes, reasonable and fair. Yes. Right. So how cornered do you think Iran actually is right now? As we know that they've already talked to their non-traditional allies, and also the fact that they think that they're capable to have equal leverage, or be able to talk with US in eye to eye.
Yeah, every political researcher and analyst who follows this closely will know, to answer your question directly, Iran are cornered. They have no leverage at the moment. They would have had a couple of years ago with the help of their proxies, for example, and even the European nations were very soft on Iran, but we've seen what's happened more recently about European nations stating that the IRGC are a terrorist organisation, which has huge implications for Iran in the geopolitical arena. So they are cornered, and as I said before, it's very difficult to see what leverage they have. As I see it, they at the moment, as each day goes by, I know they're playing for time, but their situation gets weaker.
Right. So last but not least, why do you think they're still so emboldened? They seem to, at least through statements, they seem to be so confident.
Yeah, this is very typical of the Iranian rhetoric under their totalitarian theocrats. They have to continue this these statements, as you say, of being bold and strong for the domestic audience that the declining domestic audience that still supports them. But actually, the more they make these statements, and as each day goes past, the weaker they become. We've seen what's happened in Iran in the last few days with the various explosions that they're suggesting they're all gas leaks. My God, they have a lot of gas leaks in Iran. Buildings are being blown up, domestic infrastructure is being damaged.
Yes.
They are in a very, very weak position. And apart from the rhetoric which
Yes.
they continue to give to the world's media, their situation isn't very, very strong at all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baum, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for a later discussion as well. Now, looking at Russia and Ukraine, Russia has said that it is prepared for a new global reality with no nuclear arms control limits as the New START treaty nears expiry. The landmark agreement between Moscow and Washington, signed in 2010, is set to lapse on February 5th unless a last-minute understanding is reached. Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov has said that the absence of a response from the United States to Russian proposals amounts to an answer in itself. He has said that Moscow is ready for the first time in decades for a world where the two largest nuclear powers face no formal limits on their arsenals. Ryabkov also said Russia backs China's position on arms control, criticized U.S. proposals to Iran as ultimatums, and warned that expanding U.S. missile defense systems would force Russia to respond with military measures. Russia has said that it is prepared for a new global reality with no nuclear arms control limits as the New START treaty nears expiry. The landmark agreement between Moscow and Washington, signed in 2010, is set to lapse off on February 5th unless a last-minute understanding is reached. Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov has said the absence of a response from the United States to Russian proposals amounts to an answer in itself. He said Moscow is ready for the first time in decades for a world where two largest nuclear powers face no formal limits in their arsenals. Ryabkov has also said that Russia backs China's position on arms control, criticized U.S. proposals to Iran as ultimatums, and warned that expanding U.S. missile defense systems would force Russia to respond with military measures. Russia says it is prepared for a new global reality with no nuclear arms control limits as the New START treaty nears expiry. The landmark agreement between Moscow and Washington, signed in 2010, is set to lapse on February 5th unless a last-minute understanding is reached. Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov has said the absence of a response from the United States to Russian proposals amounts to an answer in itself. He has said Moscow is ready for the first time in decades for a world where the two largest nuclear powers face no formal limits on their arsenals. Ryabkov also said Russia backs China's position on arms control, criticized U.S. proposals to Iran as ultimatums, and warned that expanding U.S. missile defense systems would force Russia to respond with military measures. Russia says it is prepared for a new global reality with no nuclear arms control limits as the New START treaty nears expiry. The landmark agreement Russia says it is prepared for a new global reality with no nuclear arms control limits. Now we move on to U.S. and Israel. U.S. President Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff is set to visit Israel starting on Tuesday for meetings with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's military chief. The visit comes amid rising tensions with Iran and as the Trump administration pushes ahead with plans to end the Gaza war. Israeli officials say Witkoff's meetings will prepare for the possible resumption of U.S.-Iran nuclear talks following recent discussions between U.S. and Israeli military leaders in Washington. This trip underscores Washington's deepening engagement in the Middle East and its efforts to manage multiple security challenges. Now we welcome back Mr. Peter Baum. He's the editor at Weekly Blitz, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Baum, for staying with us. Now looking at this, what are we to make of this, U.S. President Envoy Steve Witkoff upcoming visit to Israel once again?
Yeah, Mr. Witkoff is the most trusted of Donald Trump's lieutenants, who has been at the very center of every negotiation, whether it's Ukraine or Iran or with Greenland, etc. So the visit is very significant. And the feedback that I'm getting from people close to both administrations is that Mr. Witkoff is there in Israel to explain to Mr. Netanyahu what Mr. Trump's position is regarding the negotiations and to assuage any fears that the Israeli government have about Donald Trump going a little bit soft on the Iranian administration. Let's be clear. The objective of Donald Trump is to achieve regime change within Iran without any American boots on the ground. And therefore, he will be insistent, he will offer a way out to the ruling theocrats in Iran. And if they don't take his offer, then he will have to resort to military operations, given the overwhelming build-up of military hardware that he has going towards Iran. Netanyahu, of course, and the Israeli government and Israel at large want to see the current regime fall. How that is achieved could be if negotiations fail and if the Iranians stick to their hardline position, then it would have to be some kind of military operation. But Trump will give the Iranians a chance to give them a way out of this without losing too much face, which of course they will have to do. It's very difficult to see how the Iranian regime are going to accept the conditions that Donald Trump will impose on him. But Mr. Witkoff's visit is simply to explain and to calm the fears of the Israeli cabinet that the American administration are still going to adopt a very hard line during the negotiations, and if they fail, the military option is still on the table.
And then, so if they fail, then when you say military operation is on the table?
Indeed. Yes, I mean, one can see the continuing build-up of hardware, and it's there for a purpose. It's not there just for show or for threats. The Chinese and the Russians have withdrawn their ships from the joint exercises they had with the Iranians just this last weekend. 2 Iranian cargo ships have been sunk in the Caspian Sea carrying arms to and from Russia. That was the Rona on January the 10th and the Caspian Shiva on January the 28th. So we don't, although this has been not generally widely reported in the media, it did happen. What caused those ships to sink, we don't know, but we can only guess it was some kind of US military operation. It's no coincidence that 2 cargo ships carrying arms were both sunk. So the military hardware is there for a purpose. It's not there just to simply threaten the Iranians. But if negotiations fail, if the Iranians aren't compliant with Trump's very strict demands, then the regime will face the consequences of the American military.
With that, I would like to thank Mr. Baum for joining us today and sharing that insight. Thank you. We'll move on to Cuba and U.S. U.S. President Donald Trump has stated that Mexico would stop sending oil to Cuba. According to reports, Cuba and the United States are in communication and have not yet evolved into a formal dialogue. Trump has also said that the United States had begun talks with the highest people in Cuba days after declaring Cuba in an unusual and extraordinary threat to U.S. national security and threatening tariffs on any nation that sends oil to the communist-run island. Let's listen into what Trump has shared.
Money from anywhere. It's a failed nation. Mexico is going to cease sending them oil. So I'd like to take care of the people that are here from Cuba. You know, we have many people that came from Cuba that were thrown out of Cuba or that fled Cuba. They came over on rafts. They went through shark-infested waters. I don't know how they did it. And it was many years ago. Many would like to go back. Many would like to at least visit their relatives. And I think we're at a pretty close point. We are dealing with the Cuban leaders right now.
Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Sudhakarji. He's a senior strategic and international affairs expert, joins us live from Jaipur. Thank you very much, Major General Sudhakarji, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, does intensified pressure improve Washington's negotiating leverage with Havana, or does it risk deepening structural damage between U.S. and South American nations?
Yes. Firstly, good afternoon,
Good
Suma.
afternoon.
Thank you for inviting me for your show.
Thank you.
Certainly, it does because gradually Donald Trump, all that you see, on the face of it, he's not showing. The national security strategy is engaging with China as a friend. A hand of friendship has already been extended to China, but behind the scene, there is a hidden strategy which is unfolding gradually. And the oil from Mexico, how much oil does Mexico produce? Hardly anything. So from that, they have been actually supplying to Cuba, Mexico, Venezuela. And Mexico also falls in the circuit of that drug cartel. So when this oil is to go to Cuba, Cuba being what it is, right since 1962 till date, it continues to remain under sanction, rather very intense sanction. The question which you are asking, the short and brief answer to this is that there is a bigger design of Donald Trump. It is not as foolish as he appears to be. He's dramatizing things. Basically, they are trying to choke the axis of evil. The center of axis of evil is China. So Cuba, Mexico is the hotbed of products coming from China. They are assembled there. Thereafter, they are supplied into United States market. Same is the case with fentanyl drug. The fentanyl drug is a painkiller used by the cancer patients, and the precursor chemical comes from China, and they develop it in Colombia. Through Mexico, it goes there. Mexico also is a conduit of cocaine going from Venezuela, and that's how it is playing up. And gradually, he's trying to actually extend his domination and influence over South America or Latin America, and south of America is actually Mexico. And gradually he's trying to extend his sphere of influence and dominance so that America, what it is today, doesn't remain in the same manner. It improves during his tenure, and it contributes to making America great again. That is his philosophy and concept, as per my understanding. Back to you.
So suddenly, well, I didn't know much about U.S. and Cuba's relationship. So to me, it seems just like this came out of, not blue in particular, but just suddenly. So what's the relationship between Cuba, Mexico, and U.S., although you have already briefed on it, right?
Yeah, but Cuba has to be understood from the perspective of its origin, how communism came in 1959. Fidel Castro, he came to power, and prior to that, it used to be under the influence of, to some extent, of America. But since people, they prefer to adopt communism, Fidel Castro continued his rule till as late as 1999, and thereafter Cuba has passed on from one government to another. But basically what needs to be understood was the turning point was the 1962. The 61-62, the Cuban crisis, and before that in 1961, the Bay of Pig attack had been planned by CIA, and it was a sheer embarrassment to negotiation took place until the crisis was resolved. But subsequently what happened was, sometime in March 2025, if you recall, immediately after Donald Trump came to power, he was fully determined to bring this Russia-Ukraine war conflict to an end. But somehow any president who comes in USA, he gets dragged in or roped in by the deep state so badly that in no time Donald Trump went through, dithering, flip-flopping his decision. So at one decision, he gave a clearance for Tomahawk missile to Ukraine to be used against Russia. Russia was very patiently waiting till then, hoping that something is going to work out, and with high hopes that Donald Trump is back to power and peace will come back. With Tomahawk missile being given there, well, Russia was left with no option. So soon after this particular development, Russia and Cuba, they went in for defense peace agreement. This happened in sometime in the March. Immediately after this, there is a caveat, there is a clause in that agreement which allows Russia to deploy offensive weapon systems from Cuba. This is not being talked out about in the media. So after this agreement was signed, within a couple of days, the naval vessels of Russia started appearing in Cuban waters. Cuban water and the Caribbean, which are hugging the borders of Venezuela, are not very far away from each other. So when the naval vessels started appearing in the Cuban waters, that was a wake-up call for America, and thus the entire, I would say, decadence or the legacy structure of the national security strategy, which is to pinpointedly bring out that China was number one enemy. The complete strategy is a departure. 2025 national security strategy is a departure from what they used to follow for past more than 2 decades. So this particular strategy is putting Russia in a different place, and as a member of the peer group, assuring Russia to restore its status quo ante as far as the G8 status is concerned, trying to bring back Russia to reintegrate it with the mainstream ecosystem of the leading economies, trying to pull it back from the deep embrace of China. As far as China is concerned, overtly they are stating that you do anything wish to as far as Taiwan is concerned, but don't dare. Don't cross the Atlantic and come into this place. So therefore, this has become a turning point, and Mexico and Venezuela and Cuba, this is a kind of a triangle which is in support of the axis of evil which operate from Venezuela. Axis of evil, what I mean is Russia, Iran, China, and the Hezbollah also. The IRGC of Iran is also present there. They're the ones who are extending the wings of fire of the drugs which are penetrating into the American society. This is how it is debilitating the very core structure of the human beings and the citizens of America. That's why Donald Trump has been compelled to take a course of action as it is unfolding now. Back to you, Asoma.
Thank you for sharing that history, Sudhakar, Major General Sudhakarji. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Boeing. Boeing has confirmed that it will no longer proceed with the deal to supply F-15 fighter jets to Indonesia. The agreement, which was signed in 2023, involved 24 F-15X jets. However, it had been pending U.S. government's approval. Bernard Peters, Boeing's Vice President of Business Development and Strategy, has made the announcement at the Singapore Air Show, revealing that the partnership with Indonesia is no longer active. Boeing is yet to provide further details on why the deal was halted. The cancellation of this deal ends what was considered a landmark agreement for Indonesia's military expansion. It still remains unclear how this decision will affect Indonesia's defense strategy moving forward. Now we focus on to tech news. Elon Musk says SpaceX has acquired his artificial intelligence startup xAI in a record-setting deal that merges his space and AI ambitions. The transaction combines the rocket and satellite giant with the maker of the Grok chatbot, creating one of the most ambitious tie-ups in the technology sector. Sources say the deal values SpaceX at about $1 trillion and xAI at $250 billion, making it the largest merger and acquisition deal ever recorded. Investors in xAI will receive SpaceX shares or cash, while the combined company is expected to price shares at more than $500 each. The move further consolidates Musk's business empire and could face regulatory scrutiny, especially given SpaceX's major U.S. government and defense contracts. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.